In 1934, a widow in rural Georgia fed her 4 children every single night of the week on less than 30 cents a day. She never owned a cookbook. She never owned a timer. She cooked the way her mother taught her, fast, cheap, and with whatever was in the house. Number 7 on this list, she made 3 nights a week, and her grandchildren still ask for it. Number 2, costs less than $1 and takes 8 minutes from the cold pan to the table. Number 14 was so simple that home economics teachers refused to write it down because they were embarrassed by how well it worked. These 25 dinners were built for survival. They came from kitchens where the gas might be shut off at the end of the month, where the last egg in the carton was rationed like gold, where getting supper on the table in 10 minutes was not a cooking show gimmick. It was a necessity. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the American Food Memories family. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man dinners you can make in 10 minutes or less. Number 25. Tomato soup with crackers and butter. This was the dinner that cost nothing and asked nothing of you. A can of tomato soup, a cup of water or milk, heat it through. 5 minutes. Pour it into a bowl. Lay a sleeve of saltines beside it and a pat of butter on the rim. That was the whole meal. In the 1930s and 1940s, a can of Campbell's tomato soup cost a dime. A sleeve of crackers cost a nickel. Together they fed a mother and 2 children without requiring a single burner beyond 1, a single pot beyond 1, or a single minute beyond 5. Children who grew up eating this for dinner did not call it poverty, they called it soup night. They dragged the crackers through the red broth and let the butter melt into the bowl and soaked the last drops up with a torn cracker edge and felt full, felt warm, felt cared for. Modern restaurants now put soup and a bread course on the menu for $14. Your grandmother did the same thing for 15 cents and called it Tuesday. Number 24, fried bologna with mustard on bread. Bologna was the poor man's steak. It cost 30 cents a pound through most of the 1950s, and a pound of it fed a family of 4 for 2 nights, if the slices were thick enough. You put a cast iron skillet on the burner. You laid 2 slices of bologna flat. The heat made the edges curl up and the center puff, so you took a knife and scored an X in the middle of each slice to keep it flat. The edges browned and crisped, and the whole kitchen smelled like something was actually cooking. 2 minutes per side. Then you pulled it out, laid it on white bread, smeared yellow mustard across the top, and pressed the second slice down hard. That was dinner. That was a complete, hot, satisfying dinner that children begged for, that they remembered at 60, at 70, at 80. The crunch of the edges, the snap of the mustard, the soft white bread going warm from the meat. We now call artisan charcuterie a delicacy. Your grandfather called it Thursday. Number 23, scrambled eggs and toast. 12 cents bought a dozen eggs in 1940. That is 12 full dinners for 12 cents. A family with backyard chickens paid nothing at all. You cracked 3 eggs into a bowl. Beat them with a fork with a splash of milk and a pinch of salt, butter in the pan, eggs in. You move them slowly with a wooden spoon, letting them fold rather than scramble hard. They came out soft and custardy, still slightly wet in the center, the way every good cook knew to pull them before they were done, because they kept cooking on the plate. Toast made from day-old bread, a scrape of butter if you had it. That was supper. Protein, fat, warmth, satisfaction. 8 minutes from cold skillet to the table. Nutritionists today will tell you that 2 eggs at dinner delivers more complete protein than most fast food meals. Your great-grandmother knew that without a single study. She knew it because the children slept well afterward. Number 22, pork and beans over white bread, not as a side dish, as the whole dinner. You opened the can. You poured it into a pot and let it heat for 4 minutes, stirring once or twice, just enough to get it bubbling at the edges. Then you laid 2 pieces of white bread flat on a plate and spooned the beans directly on top. The bread soaked up the tomato sweet sauce from underneath and became something between bread and dumpling by the time you got to it. In the rural South and the industrial North alike, pork and beans from a can was not a shame. It was a staple. Campbell's, Van Camp's, Bush's Forerunner. The brands changed. The can never did. A single can cost 9 cents in 1945 and fed 1 person completely. 2 cans and a loaf of day-old bread cost less than 30 cents and fed a family of 4. The pork in the can was a single small cube of salt pork, barely the size of a marble. It did not matter. The flavor it left behind was enough. That is the lesson every good Depression-era cook learned. You do not need a lot of something, you need enough of it in the right place. Number 21, creamed corn on toast. 1 can of creamed corn, 4 slices of toast, that was it. You heated the corn in a small saucepan with a pat of butter and a pinch of salt, stirring until it thickened slightly and went glossy. 3 minutes. You laid the toast on the plate and poured the corn right over the top, letting it pool into the edges and soak the bread halfway through. Sweet, warm, golden. It tasted like it took effort. It took 7 minutes and cost 12 cents. Midwestern farm families made this every winter when the root cellar was getting low and the fresh vegetables were still months away. Canned corn lasted for years on a pantry shelf. It waited for you. It never spoiled, never rotted, never demanded attention. When you needed it, it was there. Some people added a shake of black pepper on top. Some added a slice of cheese they let melt into the hot corn before it went on the bread. Either way, the table felt set. The meal felt real. That mattered more than the recipe. Number 20, egg drop soup. A pot of chicken broth brought to a boil, 2 eggs beaten in a cup. Pour the eggs in a thin, slow stream while stirring the broth in a circle. The eggs set in ribbons, golden and silky, in under 60 seconds. Salt, pepper, done. 5 minutes. This was the sick day dinner, the tired day dinner, the nothing left in the house dinner. Chicken broth cost almost nothing, especially if you made your own from a carcass and strained it into jars. 2 eggs cost pennies. But here's the thing about egg drop soup that nobody in a cooking show will tell you. It felt like medicine. Not because it was medicinal, though broth and protein and warmth have always helped the body recover. It felt like medicine because someone made it for you when you were struggling, and that act of care was the real ingredient. Grandmothers across the country made versions of this, some calling it egg broth, some not calling it anything at all. Just the thing they made when someone was sick, when someone was sad, when there was nothing else and something had to be done. Number 19. Spam and fried egg on bread. During and after World War II, Spam became the protein that kept American families going. Soldiers overseas ate it by necessity, families at home ate it by choice. Because a 12-ounce can cost 25 cents and lasted 2 meals, you sliced it thick. Fried it in a dry pan, no oil needed, the fat in the meat rendering out and crisping the cut sides until they turned dark at the edges. 2 minutes per side. Then you cracked an egg into the same pan and fried it in the Spam drippings until the white was set and the yolk was still soft. Bread on the plate, Spam on the bread, egg on top. 3 minutes to eat. 2 minutes to clean the pan. Hawaiian families made it one way, Southern families made it another, farm families in Iowa made it a third. No 2 Spam and egg dinners were ever exactly the same, but all of them were hot, filling, fast, and real. Number 18. Buttered egg noodles with salt and pepper. A bag of egg noodles cost 19 cents in 1955 and made 6 dinners for 1 person or 2 dinners for a family of 4. You boiled them for 7 minutes in salted water. You drained them. You put them back in the hot pot and dropped in a generous knob of butter and a heavy hand of black pepper and tossed until the butter melted and coated every strand. That was dinner. Occasionally someone added a handful of frozen peas thrown in during the last 2 minutes of boiling. Occasionally someone stirred in a spoonful of sour cream. But the plain version, butter and pepper and salt, was the version that needed nothing else. Children who grew up eating this did not feel deprived. They felt fed. There is a difference that people who have never been hungry sometimes fail to understand. A hot bowl of something simple, eaten at a table, with a glass of water or milk, was not a consolation. It was a victory. Here is what the history books forget to mention. The 10-minute dinner was not invented by a meal kit company or a food blogger trying to help busy professionals. It was invented by women who worked full days, came home to houses with no dishwasher and no microwave and sometimes no hot running water, and still had to get food on the table before children fell asleep at their chairs from hunger. The speed of these meals was not laziness. It was efficiency born from necessity. When you have 1 burner, 1 pot, and 30 cents, you learn to cook fast, or you do not cook at all. Every corner of this country had its version of the 10-minute dinner, rural families in Appalachia. Factory workers in Detroit tenant farmers in Mississippi, immigrants in tenement kitchens in New York. The meals looked different. The purpose was identical: get hot food on the table before the day beat you completely. The food industry has spent 70 years convincing Americans that cooking requires 30 minutes, a list of specialized ingredients, and a proper technique. The women in these kitchens knew better. They always did. Number 17, tuna on toast, a can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and 4 slices of toast. You drained the tuna, opened the soup and put it in a small pan with half a can of milk, stirred over medium heat until it went smooth and steaming, added the tuna, stirred once more, poured it over the toast on the plate. 8 minutes, less than 50 cents. This was the Friday dinner for Catholic families across the country who did not eat meat on Fridays. It was the cold pantry dinner for everyone else. It required no fresh ingredients whatsoever. Everything came from a can. Everything lasted on the shelf for months. When the paycheck had not stretched far enough and the grocery run was 2 days away, tuna on toast was what you made. The canned tuna industry grew during the Great Depression precisely because of meals like this. Families who could not afford fresh fish could afford canned tuna, and once they discovered what cream of mushroom soup did to it, they never looked back. Number 16, white gravy over bread. Pan drippings from whatever you had cooked that week. If the pan was cold and dry, a tablespoon of butter or lard. You heated the fat, sprinkled in 2 tablespoons of flour, and stirred until it smelled nutty and turned pale gold. Then you poured in a cup of milk slowly while whisking hard, and the whole thing thickened in front of you inside of 2 minutes. Salt, a heavy grind of pepper. That was white gravy. You poured it over 2 slices of white bread on a plate. The bread went soft underneath the weight of it, and the gravy soaked in from the edges. 10 minutes from cold pan to the table. White gravy over bread was the fallback dinner in working-class households across the South and the Midwest. It was what you made when the sausage ran out, but the drippings were still in the pan. It was what you made when bread was what you had. It turned bread into a meal. That transformation, plain bread becoming something warm and filling and satisfying, was a kind of small kitchen miracle that happened every week in houses all across this country, and nobody wrote it down because everyone already knew. Number 15, chipped beef on toast. The military called it something unprintable. Families called it supper. Dried beef came in small glass jars or thin sliced from the deli counter for almost nothing. You soaked the slices in warm water for 2 minutes to pull some of the salt out. Then you made a simple white sauce, butter and flour and milk, and folded the beef into it until it heated through and the sauce went thick and slightly tan from the beef's color bleeding into the milk. Over toast, 2 slices. On a plate, the beef gave the gravy a deep, salty, slightly smoky flavor that plain white gravy could not match. It tasted substantial. It tasted like real meat on the table, even though a small jar of chipped beef cost a fraction of what any proper cut would have cost. World War II soldiers who ate this in mess halls came home and kept making it. Not because they had to, because it tasted like something, because it was warm and filling and fast, and the recipe lived in their hands the way simple meals always do. Number 14, onion gravy over mashed potato. 1 onion, 2 potatoes, butter, flour, water, or broth. You peeled and quartered the potatoes and dropped them in salted boiling water. While they cooked, you sliced the onion thin and fried it in butter in a separate pan, letting it go soft and golden, then whisking in flour and enough water or broth to make a thin, dark, sweet gravy that smelled like the onion had given everything it had to the pan. The potatoes mashed in the pot with a fork and a little butter, the onion gravy poured over the top. 10 minutes, start to finish, if the potatoes were cut small enough to cook fast. This was the meal that bridged every ethnic background. Irish families made it, Polish families made it, German families made it, African American families in the rural South made it. The onion was the cheapest flavoring in the store. The potato was the cheapest filling ingredient. Together, they made something that tasted layered and considered, like someone had been cooking for an hour, when in truth, a sharp knife and a hot pan had done the work in 10 minutes flat. Number 13, canned salmon patties. A can of salmon, 2 crackers crumbled fine, 1 egg, a little diced onion, You mashed everything together in the bowl, formed it into 2 flat patties, and fried them in a thin layer of oil until each side went golden and crisp. 8 minutes, done. Canned salmon cost less than $2 and made 2 full patties that sat on a plate with a slice of bread and felt like a real dinner. The soft bones in the canned salmon dissolved invisibly into the patty during mixing. Doctors now recommend canned salmon specifically for its calcium content, beneficial for bone health. Grandmothers who made this every week did not know the science. They knew it was cheap and filling, and their families ate every bite. A dash of hot sauce on the side, a lemon wedge if you had one. Neither was required. Both were welcome. Number 12. Rice and butter with a fried egg, leftover rice from the night before, cold from the refrigerator, a hot pan with a little butter. You broke the rice up in the pan and let it fry until the bottom layer went slightly crisp and the grains separated. 2 minutes. Then you pushed it to the side and cracked an egg into the empty space and let it fry until the white was set. Salt, pepper, a drizzle of soy sauce if the house had it, which many did not, but some did. That was dinner. Fast, filling, and built from what was already there. Fried rice with egg appeared in different forms across every immigrant community in America. Chinese families made it one way. Japanese families made it another. Filipino families made it a third. But even white working-class families who kept a pot of leftover rice and had nothing to add to it figured out that a hot pan and a single egg could turn yesterday's starch into tonight's supper. Leftover rice fed more people more times than any cookbook ever acknowledged. Here is something that does not get talked about in food history. The refrigerator changed how poor families ate in ways nobody fully planned for. Before widespread refrigeration, poor households ate what they cooked that night because there was no safe way to store it. After refrigeration became affordable through the 1940s and 1950s, a new kind of meal emerged, the leftover meal. Leftover rice became fried rice, leftover beans became a sandwich spread, leftover bread became toast or croutons or the thickener for a soup. The refrigerator did not just preserve food, it multiplied it. One cooking effort stretched across 2 nights, then 3. The families who understood this, who planned a Monday pot of beans knowing it would become Tuesday's dinner and Wednesday's lunch, were practicing a form of resource management that no business school course has ever properly honored. They did not call it meal planning, they called it making things stretch. And they did it every week, without an app, without a planner, without any system beyond hard experience and the quiet arithmetic of the American poor. Number 11, bean toast. Canned navy beans or pinto beans heated in a small pan with a little butter, a pinch of salt, and a splash of water until the liquid went thick and the beans softened further and broke apart slightly at the edges. Spooned over toast, 2 slices on a plate, a dash of hot sauce on top, done. This was common in working-class communities across the country, and it spread through American kitchens of every background because it made obvious sense. Beans were protein, toast was carbohydrate. Together they made a nutritionally complete meal. Food scientists call that combination complementary proteins. Your grandmother called it Tuesday night. A can of navy beans cost 9 cents in 1950. A loaf of bread cost 14. A family of 4 could eat for under 30 cents. The bean toast dinner was not glamorous. It was not photogenic. It was not the kind of meal anyone bragged about at work the next morning. But it held you through the night and put you at the table the next morning without hunger pulling at you, and that was the whole point. Number 10, fried potatoes and onion. 2 potatoes sliced thin, half an onion sliced, a spoonful of bacon grease or butter, cast iron skillet, high heat. The potatoes went in first, flat in a single layer, and you did not touch them for 3 minutes, letting the bottoms go brown and crisp. Then you flipped them, added the onion, and let everything cook together, the onion going sweet and soft while the potatoes finished crisping on the second side. Salt, pepper, done. 10 minutes. This was a side dish that quietly became the main dish in hard times. When there was no meat and no beans and the pantry was down to what grew in the ground, fried potatoes and onion was what a family of 6 ate for dinner without apology. Church ladies in West Virginia still talk about this meal. Not as poverty food, as comfort food. As the thing someone's grandmother made when the whole family came over and there was not enough of anything else. The skillet always had room for more potatoes, The table always had room for one more person. That generosity, the ability of a cheap pan of fried starch to feed whoever showed up, was the real gift. Number 9. Corn chowder from the can. 1 can of creamed corn, 1 can of whole kernel corn, 1 small potato, diced very fine so it cooked fast, a cup of milk, butter, salt. The potato in a small pot of water, boiling hard for 5 minutes until just tender. Drain it. Add both cans of corn and the milk and the butter and let everything heat through over medium, stirring occasionally, until the creamed corn thickened the whole pot into something that looked and tasted like a soup that had been cooking for an hour. It had not. It had been cooking for 8 minutes. Midwest farm wives made this in January when the root cellar was picked clean and the fields were frozen solid, and the canned goods from the summer were the only thing standing between the family and a cold, empty table. Canned corn lasted for years. This soup waited for you patiently on the shelf, asking nothing, ready whenever you needed it. A bowl of this on a cold night with a heel of buttered bread beside it was not survival food, it was comfort. Those are not always different things. Number 8. Sardines on crackers with hot sauce. This sounds like a snack. For millions of working Americans across the 20th century, it was dinner. A tin of sardines cost a dime and delivered more protein percent than almost anything else in the grocery store. You drained the oil, laid the fish on saltines, arranged across a plate, and shook hot sauce over the top. That was it. No cooking, no heat required, 5 minutes, including the time it took to find the tin opener. Dock workers in Louisiana ate this for supper. Coal miners in Pennsylvania packed it for their night shift meal. Men who lived in boarding houses with no kitchen access ate sardines on crackers because a tin opener and a sleeve of crackers were the only tools required. The omega-3 fatty acids in sardines, the calcium from the soft bones, the protein, none of that was on anyone's mind. What was on their mind was that supper needed to happen and the tin was already in the cupboard. Simple food that required no fire was freedom in a house with an unreliable stove. Number 7. Macaroni and butter with garlic. Not macaroni and cheese, not a casserole. Just pasta, butter, garlic, salt, and a heavy grind of black pepper. You boiled elbow macaroni in salted water for 8 minutes, drained it, went back in the pot with a generous amount of butter and 1 clove of raw garlic grated or pressed in, and tossed everything together over the low heat still left in the pot. The butter melted and coated every piece of pasta. The garlic went from raw and sharp to just barely softened from the residual heat, and the whole thing smelled like an Italian grandmother's kitchen, even if no Italian grandmother had ever stepped foot in the house. A box of macaroni cost 9 cents in 1960. A head of garlic cost a nickel. A stick of butter cost 20 cents and lasted a week of meals like this. Italian immigrant families taught their neighbors this meal. Their neighbors taught their neighbors. By 1955, buttered pasta with garlic was in kitchens from New England to the Pacific Northwest, not because anyone published a recipe, but because good, simple food travels by word of mouth faster than any cookbook. Number 6. Hot dogs in bean broth. You opened a can of pork and beans. You poured it into a pot. You sliced 2 hot dogs into thick coins and dropped them in. Stirred. Let it heat for 5 minutes until the hot dog slices puffed slightly and the whole pot smelled like a summer cookout even in the middle of February. Over bread, in a bowl, on a plate. It did not matter. Hot dogs were the cheapest meat in the grocery store through most of the 20th century. A package of 8 cost 20 cents in 1952. A can of beans cost 9 cents. Together they made a dinner that could feed 3 people for under 30 cents and tasted like something a child would ask for, again by name. Generations of American children grew up requesting this meal, not knowing it was a poverty meal. They just knew it was delicious. They were right. Some meals are cheap and good at the same time, and this was one of them. Number 5. Cheese toast. White bread. A slice of American cheese, the broiler on high. You laid the bread on a baking sheet, put the cheese on top, and slid it under the broiler for 2 minutes until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges and the bread underneath went golden and crisp. That was dinner. Sometimes there were 2 slices, sometimes there was a bowl of canned tomato soup beside it. Either way, it took 3 minutes and cost almost nothing, and every child who grew up in the middle of the 20th century considered cheese toast one of the great meals of their childhood. American cheese was developed specifically to be cheap, shelf-stable, and easy to melt. It was, in that sense, a piece of food engineering perfectly matched to the broiler method. The processed cheese that food snobs mock today was the cheese that kept working-class children from going to bed hungry. That deserves more respect than it gets. Here's what nobody says in polite conversation. The meals on this list are embarrassingly simple, and that simplicity has been used against the people who ate them for over 100 years. Home economists in the 1930s called them nutritionally inadequate. Food writers in the 1950s called them unsophisticated. Food culture in the 1980s and 1990s pretended they had never existed, rushing toward complexity and technique and the mythology that good food required time and money and training. But here is what those meals actually did. They kept people alive, they kept families together at a table, they kept children in school instead of falling asleep from hunger, they kept workers on their feet through 12-hour shifts, they kept elderly people independent in their own kitchens when the alternative was going without eating at all. Simple food made fast with almost nothing is not a lesser form of cooking. It is the original form of cooking. Every complicated cuisine in human history grew out of it. French technique came from peasant kitchens. Italian food came from farm tables. American comfort food came from exactly the dinners on this list. We did not rise above these meals. We came from them, and knowing where we came from is the first step to understanding what food is actually for. Number 4, fried egg on rice. 1 egg. A cup of cooked rice, hot from the pot or reheated in a pan with a little water to loosen it. A hot skillet with a small drizzle of oil. The egg went in and cooked until the white was set and the yolk was still runny. The rice went on the plate. The egg went on top. You broke the yolk with the first bite, and it ran down into the rice and became the sauce. Soy sauce if you had it, hot sauce if you preferred, salt and pepper if you had nothing else. This meal has been eaten under different names in Japan, in Korea, in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in China, and in 100 different poor households across America by families who never ate Asian food and had no idea this was a tradition that stretched across the Pacific. They just knew that an egg on rice worked, that it was filling and fast and good. Some knowledge is universal. Some meals are discovered by every culture independently because they are obvious. Obvious is not a criticism. Obvious means it works. Number 3, tomato soup from scratch in 10 minutes. This is not the fancy roasted version. This is the Depression-era version. A can of whole peeled tomatoes, crushed by hand into a pot with a little butter and half an onion grated directly into the pan so it dissolved into the tomatoes without anyone noticing it was there. A pinch of sugar to cut the acid. Salt. Heat to a simmer. 6 minutes. Then you ran a fork through it or used a masher to break up the remaining tomato chunks and let it reduce for 2 more minutes into something thick, bright red, and impossibly good for something made from a single can and 2 pantry items. The grated onion was the secret. It disappeared into the soup and gave it a depth that made people think they were tasting something slow-cooked. They were not. They were tasting the trick that home cooks passed to one another through the 1930s and 1940s, when fresh tomatoes were seasonal luxuries and a can of peeled tomatoes was always 30 cents on the grocery shelf. Served with buttered toast torn into strips for dunking, nothing else needed. Number 2, bread and butter pickle sandwich with a fried egg. Cold bread and butter pickles from the jar, 2 slices of bread, 1 egg. You fried the egg in butter until the edges crisped, laid it on 1 slice of bread, layered pickles thickly on the other, pressed the 2 halves together. The pickle was cold, tangy, sweet and crunchy. The egg was hot and rich. The bread held everything together and went soft against the heat of the egg where they touched. This was a meal that sounds strange until you eat it, and then it makes perfect sense. The contrast was the whole point. Hot and cold, rich and sharp, soft and crunchy. It woke you up and filled you up at the same time. Working families who kept a jar of homemade bread and butter pickles in the cellar and a dozen eggs from backyard chickens could make this dinner for almost nothing. In 2019, food scientists confirmed that the fermentation in bread and butter pickles produces beneficial bacteria that support digestion, and that the vinegar helps manage blood sugar levels after a starchy meal. Your great-grandmother did not know the science. She knew it tasted good and settled the stomach. She was right on both counts. Number 1. Chicken broth with egg noodles. Not chicken noodle soup from a can. The real thing, made in 10 minutes from homemade broth you had in the refrigerator and a handful of egg noodles you kept in the cupboard for exactly this purpose. 2 cups of broth in a pot, brought to a boil, a handful of egg noodles in, 6 minutes, salt, pepper, done. The broth was gold. Clear and rich and deeply savory from the chicken carcass that had simmered over the weekend. It cost nothing. The carcass was what was left after Sunday's roast chicken, or after the rotisserie bird from the grocery store. You covered it with water and simmered it for 2 hours and strained it and put it in jars in the refrigerator, and suddenly you had the base for 4 nights of fast dinners. The noodles swelled in the hot broth and turned silky and soft. A bowl of this on a Tuesday night after a long day was not second best to anything. It was better than anything that arrived in a delivery bag. Every culture has a version. Every grandmother in every country has made something close to this for someone they loved. That is not a coincidence. That is the truth about food at its most fundamental. A bowl of warm broth with something soft swimming in it, eaten quietly, slowly, at the end of a hard day, is the oldest comfort human beings have ever invented. It takes 10 minutes. It costs almost nothing. It works every time. Here is my challenge to you this week. Pick one of these dinners. Just one. Not the sardines if that feels too far, but maybe the cheese toast or the fried egg on rice or the chicken broth with egg noodles. Maybe the fried bologna, the one your grandfather made without thinking, the one your kids will think is the strangest dinner they have ever had until they eat it and ask for it again. Make it on a weeknight, not on a weekend when there is time and ambition. On a Tuesday or a Wednesday when there is nothing left in you and the refrigerator looks impossible and ordering something delivered sounds easier, make it in 10 minutes. Sit at the table, eat it slow, then come back and tell us which one you made in the comments. I want to know if the fried bologna still holds up. I want to know if the white gravy over bread surprised anyone. I want to know if there is someone out there whose grandmother made the egg drop soup every time the house felt uncertain, every time the week got hard, every time someone needed a reminder that a warm bowl of something was enough to make it to the next morning. Because these were not budget meals. They were not shortcuts. They were not the meals you ate when you failed to plan correctly. They were the meals that kept this country going. Simple, fast, hot, made with what was there, eaten at tables that had seen better days. And somehow, every single time, enough. That is what American food memory is. Not the fancy stuff, not the restaurants, the 10-minute dinners that nobody wrote down because everyone already knew. We are writing them down now.